The wind rolled off the Vale's jagged cliffs like a whisper of old blood, carrying the weight of ancient honor and fresh betrayal. Jaime Lannister sat on his black destrier, armor glinting faintly under the gray skies. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not in the Vale, not alive, not commanding an army that once would have spit on his name. But war changed everything, and in Westeros it changed fast. The Eyrie had always been a fortress of pride, built high above the clouds, ruled by men too weak or too proud to bend. When the last war shattered the north and the riverlands, and when King's Landing fell to foreign flames, the Vale stood untouched, silent observers to a kingdom burning. Until now, Jaime hadn't come here as a conqueror, not at first. After Cersei's death in the Red Keep, crushed beneath the very kingdom she tried to hold on to, Jaime had barely escaped with his life. Half-burned, half-mad, he wandered from town to town, stripped of name and purpose. People whispered Kingslayer as he passed, but they no longer feared him, only pitied him. He was a ghost of gold and scars. Acre, it was in Gulltown he first heard the Vale was splitting from the fractured realm. The boy lord, Robin Arryn, was said to be madder than ever, poisoned by the very milk of the poppy that kept him breathing. His council had fractured, lords bickered like children. And worse, the Mountains of the Moon stirred with rebellious clans who no longer feared House Arryn's rule. Somewhere in all that chaos, Jaime found opportunity, or maybe it found him. It started with a duel. A drunken knight had insulted him in a tavern, calling him a washed-up lion with no teeth left. Jaime didn't draw his sword. He simply stepped aside as the knight swung, broke the man's wrist with a tankard, and stared down every soldier in the room until no one else moved. The next day, a raven flew to Runestone. Jon Royce, Bronze Jon, still held the loyalty of most Vale bannermen. And for reasons Jaime couldn't understand at the time, Royce sent for him. "Why me?" Jaime had asked, standing before the Lord in a cold hall built of stone and silence. Yet Royce looked at him hard. "Because you've lost everything. And men who've lost everything fight like they've nothing to fear." And that was how it began. Jaime became a sword for hire, then a commander, and now, after 3 battles and the death of Sir Dennis Hardyang, the man whispered to be the next Lord Protector. He was handed full command of the Vale army. Some hated him for it, others feared him, but they followed. And now, standing before 10,000 men ready to march into the Riverlands, Jaime couldn't help but wonder how far he'd fallen, or risen. He wore no Lannister red now, only steel grey and a golden pin shaped like a falcon's wing, symbol of his borrowed command. Behind him, Sir Clee Serwyn approached, a grim Northman who had sworn loyalty after the fall of Winterfell. You don't smile much," Jaime said, not turning. "There's nothing to smile about," Cleely muttered. "There's nothing to smile about. Not in. We're marching into broken lands, led by a man half the realm still wants dead." Jaime smirked. "Only half. Maybe less now," Cleely admitted. "Some think you're what the Vale needs. A lion who's learned to kill without pride." Jaime looked out at the mist-covered road ahead. "I don't command this army because I'm noble," he said finally. "I command it because I'm the only one mad enough to know what it takes to keep it alive." The drums began to beat, the banners lifted, and the Vale's army began its slow descent down the mountain pass. Jaime spurred his horse forward, one hand on the hilt of his sword, the other brushing the falcon pin on his cloak. He didn't come here to be a hero. He came because he had nowhere else left to go, and yet fate had made him a commander. It had been 3 days since they left the Eyrie behind, but the mountains still clung to them like claws. The air was thinner here, cold enough to bite through armor, and the roads wound like snakes through cliffs that could collapse with one bad rain. Jaime rode near the front, quiet and watchful. He wasn't the type of commander who barked orders just to feel important. He didn't need to. The men listened, even when they didn't like him. The Vale Knights followed him not because they loved him, but because they had no better choice. And somehow, in this broken kingdom, that was enough. Surly Serwyn remained at his side, his presence like a shadow. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, and even then his words were sharp and short. Jaime respected that. The Northmen didn't care about names or bloodlines, only results. "You fought in these lands before?" Or clearly asked, eyes scanning the trail ahead. Jaime nodded. "Years ago, before the rebellion. I remember the trees being taller. Or maybe you were shorter," Cleely grunted, managing what might have been a joke. Jaime almost smiled. Almost. As they rode, messengers came and went. Scouts reported movement in the valleys. Remnants of old Lannister loyalists now turned into scattered bandit groups. Others warned of mountain clans growing bold, testing the edge of their territory. Jaime gave orders quickly, without drama. Split patrols, reinforce the rear, no unnecessary battles, no glory hunting. The old Jaime would have wanted a charge. The new Jaime just wanted to keep men alive. At night, they made camp near a half-ruined watchtower, once a post for Arryn scouts, now abandoned. The men set fires low to the ground, careful not to attract unwanted attention. Jaime sat alone outside his tent, staring into the flames. His golden hand, dulled and scratched from years of wear, glinted dully in the firelight. He hated it still, not for what it was, but for what it reminded him of. Memories came uninvited. Cersei's screams beneath the Red Keep, Tyrion's last words before vanishing across the narrow sea. Brienne's face stained with tears as he walked away from her for the last time. He thought about all the people he'd left behind, some dead, some alive, all ghosts now. Yet Royce had given him command because no one else wanted the burden. The Vale was divided, half the lords squabbling over titles, the other half too afraid to act. That war was coming whether they liked it or not. The Riverlands were up in flames again. The Ironborn raided the coast, and a new king had risen in Harrenhal, calling himself the Scourge of the Trident. If the Vale didn't act soon, they'd be next. Jaime didn't care about saving the Vale. He didn't even care about saving himself, but leading men into battle gave him purpose. And purpose, no matter how broken, was better than wandering through life as a ghost. A rustling broke his thoughts. He turned, hand on his sword. It was Sir Miles Belmore, a young knight with more pride than sense. He saluted stiffly, eyes filled with hesitation. "My Lord Commander," Miles said, "the Lords Grafton and Linderley request your presence." "They're unhappy." "Of course they are," Jaime muttered. "Lead the way." He followed Miles to a larger tent, where several high-born knights and lords were gathered around a map. Their voices lowered as Jaime entered. No one bowed. Lord Grafton, fat and flushed, spoke first. "We ride through cursed land, on the word of a Lannister. We trusted Lord Royce, not the Kingslayer." Jaime stepped closer to the table, eyes calm but cold. "If you have a better plan, I'd love to hear it. Or would you prefer to sit in your castles while bandits torch your fields?" Lord Linderley sneered. "We don't take orders from lions." "No," Jaime said softly. "You take orders from the man who knows how to keep your men breathing. If I was still a lion, you'd be dead already." Silence followed. "War," he leaned over the map and pointed to the Riverlands. "We strike here, fast and clean. Cut off their supplies, disrupt their alliances. This war doesn't need heroes. It needs survivors." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lord Redfort nodded slowly. "The Kingslayer is right." Jaime looked around the room. "Don't follow me because you like me. Follow me because I know how to end this before your sons die screaming in a ditch." He turned and walked out without waiting for approval. Outside, the wind had picked up again, colder this time. Clearly Serwyn met him at the tent's edge. "How long do you think they'll keep following you?" Jaime looked out into the night, long enough. The sun rose like a bleeding eye behind the eastern peaks, casting red light across the Vale Army's slow-moving columns. The road curved through narrow passes, tight enough that two wagons couldn't ride side by side without scraping rock. Jaime hated it. Any decent ambush would turn this entire trail into a graveyard. He rode ahead of the formation, watching the cliffs like they might breathe. He hadn't slept the night before. Not because of dreams, those had stopped years ago. Now it was silence that kept him awake, the kind that came before storms, the kind that reminded him of the Trident, or the fields outside Casterly Rock where his father once trained him to kill. He glanced back at the column. Banners of House Royce, Redfort, Corbray, and other Vale lords flapped dull and quiet in the wind. Too quiet, beside him, Cleely Serwyn chewed dried meat like it was leather. "We shouldn't be here," he muttered. "I've got a bad feeling that's because you're from the north," Jaime said. "You think snowstorms are bad omens?" Clee narrowed his eyes. "Snow doesn't kill you for fun. Men do." Jaime nodded. Fair point. Before either of them could say more, a horn blew. Once, then again. Short blasts, not for attack but alert. A scout galloped down the path toward them, his face pale and blood running from his cheek. "Riders ahead, my lord," the boy shouted. "Not bandits, organized, black banners. No sigil." Jaime's jaw clenched. "How many?" "Maybe 300, blocking the pass near Breakneck Gorge." That name made Jaime's chest tighten. Breakneck Gorge was exactly what it sounded like. A narrow death trap, with cliffs high on both sides and only one way through. "We don't have time for a siege," Jaime muttered. Clearly rode closer. "Could be deserters. Or worse, mercenaries." Jaime's golden hand clenched the reins. Or there's someone's message. He turned in his saddle, calling over Sir Miles Belmore. "Ready the cavalry. I want archers high on the north ridge. If they're dumb enough to block the pass above." Belmore hesitated. "You mean to engage, my lord?" Jaime met his eyes. "I mean to show them we don't stop for ghosts." Within an hour, the army slowed to a halt while Jaime and a small detachment approached the pass. The black-bannered force stood across the narrow trail, their armor mismatched, but their formations solid. These weren't wild clans or farmers with pitchforks. They were killers, sold swords. At the center stood a rider in dark plate, no helm, his face gaunt and lined with old scars. He carried a bastard sword strapped across his back and wore no sigil, only a ring with a broken stag crest. Jaime knew that face. "Sir Harris of House Brown Hollow," he said coldly. "Didn't you die at River Run?" The man smiled thinly. "Almost. Spent a year bleeding in a rat hole while your brother's army fell apart." "And now?" Harris nodded to the men behind him. "Now I get paid to kill anyone dumb enough to march this way." Jaime tilted his head. "Who's paying you?" "That's the wrong question," Harris said. "The real question is, how many corpses are you willing to step over just to matter again, Kingslayer?" Jaime didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he looked up, past the cliffs. Pew. A second later, the first arrow struck. Archers hidden above the ridge let fly. Dozens of black-clad mercenaries fell before they even raised shields. The Vale cavalry burst from behind rocks on the southern edge, sweeping through the flanks like a hammer. Jaime drew his sword, not with flair but with purpose. What followed wasn't a battle. It was an execution. They broke the mercenaries in less than an hour. The survivors ran. Harris tried to rally twice, but his men had already seen enough. They weren't loyal, just bought. Jaime stood over Harris's body after it was done, blood dripping from his blade. "You asked how many quarters I'm willing to step over," he whispered. He turned, walking back toward the waiting column. "All of them, if I must." The army moved on before nightfall, silence heavy in the air. No one questioned his command now. They didn't cheer either. They just watched him, the way soldiers watch a blade, cold, sharp, and dangerous. As the Vale banners moved forward once more, Jaime rode alone for a while. Sims. He no longer wondered why he led. Chuckled. He only wondered how long it would take before he became the very thing he used to fight. The smoke of the dead still lingered behind them, faint and sour in the cold air. Jaime hadn't spoken much since the skirmish at Breakneck Gorge. He didn't need to. The army had seen everything it needed to see. When the men passed him on the road now, their eyes didn't hold doubt anymore. Just silence and a kind of nervous respect, like they were following something dangerous and sacred at the same time. He hated that look. Command was never about being liked, but when men started looking at you like you were something more than human, that was when mistakes happened. That was when blind loyalty. Jaime had seen that look before, in the Red Keep, on the faces of soldiers who followed mad kings and worse queens. And look where it got them. As the army passed into the lowlands of the Riverlands, the terrain changed. The green returned, so did the rot. Dozens of small villages had been burned to the ground, not by Targaryen fire or Greyjoy raiders, but by desperate men killing for food or vengeance or nothing at all. They passed a hamlet called Stonefork, or what was left of it. The walls were black with soot, and the stench of rotting bodies hung thick, women, children, livestock all dead. Some had been nailed to doors, others had been dumped in the well. Crows scattered when Jaime dismounted and walked through the wreckage. He said nothing, just looked. Behind him, Sir Cleeserwyn muttered, "This wasn't war, this was punishment." Jaime crouched near one of the corpses, a young girl no older than Myrcella had been. He didn't flinch. They weren't trying to send a message, he said. They were trying to erase something. Who would do this? Clearly asked, his voice low. Jaime stood. Someone who's not afraid of the Vale marching. Later that night, they held council in a ruined barn just outside the burned village. Lords Grafton, Lindley, and Redfort attended, along with Royce's raven-sent proxy, a hard-eyed woman named Lady Thera Belmore. She had taken control of several smaller houses after their lords had fallen, and she spoke like someone used to commanding men who didn't like taking orders from women. "The trail leads west," she said, pointing to blood-stained maps. "Toward Harrenhal, that's where these butcheries are rooted." "That's cry. Lord Grafton scoffed. "So we ride straight into the Black Tower, might as well throw ourselves off the Eyrie now." Lady Thera fixed him with a stare. "Cowards hide behind burned villages, not armies." Grafton turned red. "These divers leads to bur once a pro road workus." "Watch your tongue, she's right," Jaime cut in, his voice quiet but sharp. "This wasn't some random raid. Someone's trying to scare us off, to keep the Vale in the mountains. But fear only works if you give it a place to grow." He stepped toward the table. "We marched to Harrenhal." Lord Linderley shook his head. "That's madness. The castle's cursed." Jaime looked him dead in the eye. "So am I." No one argued after that. As the meeting ended, Lady Thera lingered. She watched Jaime from across the room like a hawk deciding whether to strike or perch. "You don't talk like a lion," she said. "Don't feel like one either. You gave those mercenaries no mercy. Not even the wounded. Jaime didn't blink. Mercy didn't help me when I begged for it once. I learned." "From whom?" He didn't answer. She stepped closer. "People talk about you, you know, the man who killed a king, who slept with his sister, who burned the Riverlands with his father, and now commands a foreign army." Jaime met her gaze. "People always talk. What matters is who's left standing when they stop." She tilted her head. "And if Harrenhal swallows you like it swallowed everyone else?" Jaime turned toward the window, looking out at the night beyond. "Then maybe that's where I belong." He left before she could ask what he meant. That night, as the men settled into camp, a strange stillness fell over the army, like they all felt the weight of where they were heading. Harrenhal wasn't just a place. It was a memory carved into stone, cursed by fire, betrayal, madness. The perfect place for a man like Jaime Lannister to stake his name once more. Oh, he sat alone again outside his tent, the wind brushing against his scarred face. He watched the stars for a long time, not searching for hope, just trying to remember what it felt like to be anything other than what he'd become. The first sight of Harrenhal came 3 days later, jagged towers rising like broken teeth against a grey sky. Even in daylight, the castle looked cursed. Massive half-melted stone walls slouched over the river like they were too tired to hold themselves up. Banners didn't fly from its towers, birds didn't circle. The air felt heavier here. Jaime had seen it before, years ago, during the war against Robb Stark. Back then, it had been held by Tywin Lannister, his father, the Lion of Casterly Rock. It was here they carved up the Riverlands, burned towns, hung boys too young to shave just because they had wolf sigils on their cloaks. He remembered that version of himself, gold armor, smug smile, still thinking he was untouchable. That man was dead now. Only the ghosts remained. The army halted 1/2 mile from the outer walls. Jaime rode forward with a small guard, Clearly Serwyn and Lady Thera beside him. There was no sign of life from within, no scouts, no riders, just silence. Place looks abandoned," Clearly muttered, hand on the hilt of his sword. "No place this cursed is ever truly empty," Lady Thera replied. Jaime squinted toward the tallest tower, blackened at the top like it had been clawed by a dragon. Someone's watching. No doubt, a rider approached from the trees behind them, a scout dirt-smeared and out of breath. He slid off his horse and bowed quickly. "My lord, the Black Talons are here." Jaime frowned. "The Sellsword Company?" The scout nodded. "Camped 2 miles east, 400 strong. Hired blades, wearing no colors but black talons on their chests. And they're not alone. Word is they answer to someone inside the castle." Jaime didn't need to ask who. It made sense now. The butchered villages, the mercenary ambushes, the silence from the lords of the Riverlands. It all pointed to one name. Sir Walton Rivers, a bastard from the Trident. Former bannerman to House Frey, turned sellsword captain after the war. Cunning, ruthless, and driven by nothing but coin and revenge. He had no house, no code, and no shame. But more importantly, he had no fear of Jaime Lannister. That made him dangerous. Back at camp, Jaime ordered the army to make no fires, keep movement to a minimum. Harrenhal might have looked empty, but it wasn't. He could feel it. That night, he called only 4 people into his tent. Clearly, Lady Thera, Sir Miles, and Maester Tygon, a young Vale-trained healer who'd served at Runestone before being assigned to the army. Jaime spread out a rough map on the table and tapped the eastern side of the castle. "We can't take Harrenhal by force, not without losing half our strength." "Then what's the plan?" Clearly asked. "We dig in and wait." Jaime looked at Thera. "What do you know about Sir Walton Rivers?" She folded her arms. "That he cuts tongues out of men who talk too loud. That he burns banners of any house he's ever served. And that he's trying to build something in that cursed. Something that scares the lords too much to fight." "He's building a kingdom," Jaime said. "One built on fear, not bloodlines." Miles frowned. "So what do we do?" Jaime leaned forward. "We don't wait for him to strike. We send him a message." Thera raised an eyebrow. "What kind of message?" Jaime turned to Maester Tygon. "You still have those raven cages?" Tygon blinked. "A few." "Yes." "Why?" Jaime smiled without humor. "We're going to write letters to every broken house in the Riverlands. to every widow, every orphan, every coward hiding behind stone walls. Tell them a Lannister commands the Vale now. Tell them the Talons will fall, and then he tapped the map again. We raid their supply lines. Helpmex. Cut off food, make them bleed without ever drawing a sword. Clearly stared at him. You've done this before. Jaime looked away. I've seen it done. It began at dawn. Small detachments rode in all directions. Not to fight, but to send word. Not of peace, but of reckoning. They let the rumor spread. The Kingslayer commands the armies of the Vale. And he's come for justice. By nightfall, the first raven returned, and with it, a warning, a scroll with no seal. Only a symbol scratched in dried blood, a broken lion. Thera read the message aloud. Come and take it, Kingslayer. The ghosts of Harrenhal are waiting. Jaime stared into the flames after she finished. He knew what this was. A challenge, an invitation, a trap, and yet something inside him stirred, not fear, but something colder, purpose. He rose to his feet. If they want ghosts, he said, then ghosts they'll get. They moved before dawn, the mist still thick over the ground like a burial shroud. Jaime had chosen only 100 men for the mission. Fast, silent, and ready to die if needed. The rest of the Vale army stayed behind, hidden in the forest near the main road. Their orders clear, wait for a signal that might never come. This wasn't a full assault, this was something quieter, darker. A test. Jaime rode with no banners, no armor that gleamed. Just boiled leather, steel greaves, and a cloak stained from too many campaigns. Beside him, clearly Serwyn rode in silence, his face carved from stone. Behind them, Lady Thera led the second line, her blade already drawn and resting on her thigh. They reached the edge of the cursed castle before the sun had truly risen. Harrenhal looked no less monstrous than it had days ago, towers leaning like drunk giants, walls cracked like they'd been cursed by the gods themselves. Jaime remembered the stories of Harren the Black, burned alive with his sons inside those towers, of the ghosts that screamed from the walls at night, and now a new legend was forming inside, one that would wear the face of Sir Walton Rivers. Jaime dismounted at the edge of the dry moat. The old drawbridge was lowered, unmanned, no guards, no archers. Just silence, too easy. It's a tarp, Thera said. He wants you to walk inside. Jaime nodded. And he thinks I will. You're not going in? Clee asked, surprised. I'm going in, Jaime said, tightening the strap on his sword. But I'm not taking all of you with me. He wants a conversation, not a battle. Not yet. Thera stepped forward. You shouldn't go alone. I'm not alone, Jaime replied, tapping the hilt of his sword with his golden hand. I've got a few regrets keeping me company. Without another word, he crossed the bridge, cloak dragging behind him like a shadow. Inside the gates, the courtyard was still. Charred wood and blackened stones lit ground. The ghosts of old wars clung to every surface. The air smelled of mold and old blood. Jaime walked slowly, each step echoing like a drumbeat. He found him in the great hall. Sir Walton Rivers sat at the far end, beneath the melted iron throne that had once been dragged from King's Landing during the war. It wasn't the real Iron Throne, just a crude mockery made from rusted blades and old armor. Still, the message was clear. Walton wanted to rule. He just didn't care what kind of king he had to become to do it. Kingslayer, he said with a grin, rising from the throne. Didn't think you'd actually come. Jaime took in the man. Dark hair shaved close to his scalp, a jagged scar over his left eye, and armor stained with blood that was clearly not his own. A killer through and through, but not mad, not foolish, dangerous. I heard you were collecting broken things, Jaime said. Walton chuckled. And you're the most broken of them all. Jaime didn't smile. You butchered children in Stonefork. They were loyal to the wolf, Walton said, shrugging. And I don't share my kingdom. You don't have a kingdom, Jaime replied. You have a pile of rubble and 400 mercenaries who'd sell your head for a better coin. Walton stepped down from the dais, and yet here you are alone in my hall talking peace. Yeah, I didn't come for peace, Jaime said, eyes hard. I came to give you one chance. Walton stopped. To do what? Surrender, dismantle the Black Talons, march out of Harrenhal and never come back. Walton laughed, long and cruel. You think you scare me? You're a crippled Lannister who lost his name and his family. You're a ghost with a sword. Jaime stepped closer. That's what makes me dangerous. They stood only feet apart now. No blades drawn yet, not physically. Why the Vale? Walton asked. For first, follow Royce. Why command sheep who don't want you? Jaime answered without hesitation. Because someone has to be the sword when the realm turns to rot, and I know rot when I see it. Walton tilted his head. You really think you can cleanse this place? You think men like you get redemption? Jaime's voice was low. I don't want redemption. I want silence and peace. And if I have to bury 1,000 bastards like you to get it, then so be it. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Walton smiled again, but it was colder now, less amused. Wol bol bol bops. You've got guts, Kingslayer, he said. Too bad you'll be dead by morning. Jaime didn't flinch. You first. He turned and walked out, not looking back. The message was delivered. Now war would follow. By the time Jaime returned to the camp, dusk had fallen, and the fires had been doused. The men didn't speak when they saw him. They just stared, some in awe, some in fear. Word had already spread that he went into Harrenhal alone and walked back out untouched. But no one asked what was said inside. They didn't need to. The storm was coming. Colkley Serwyn approached him as he dismounted. His face was tight, jaw set like a man who already knew the answer but still had to ask. Well? Jaime didn't bother sugarcoating it. He's not leaving, and he wants a war. Clearly nodded. Of course he does. Own, Lady Thera arrived next, eyes sharp. We should strike now, catch his men before they dig in. A quick assault, break his line before it hardens. Jaime shook his head. That's exactly what he wants. He's not hiding in Harrenhal because he's afraid. He's luring us. He wants us to bleed, trying to take a ruin. Thera narrowed her eyes. So we just wait? No, Jaime said. We force his hand. Tomorrow night we hit his outer camps. Fast, silent, small groups only. No banners, no mercy, Clasley frowned. Assassination? War, Jaime corrected. The old kind. The kind that doesn't care who's honorable. The council broke up after that, and the Vale army prepared for blood. Jaime sat alone in his tent, sharpening his blade by candlelight. The steel hissed against the whetstone, steady and cold. It wasn't about making it sharper. It was about the sound, the rhythm, the control. He thought of Tyrion, of Brienne, of Cersei, crushed beneath the Red Keep, of his father killed on a chamber pot. And somewhere deep in that storm of memories, he remembered himself just a boy once. A boy who wanted to be a knight, not a killer, who believed in honor before it rotted in his hands. Who key? He ran a finger along the edge of the sword. It bit his skin, not deep, just enough to remind him he was still alive. That nights. The raids began. Under cover of moonlight, teams of 5 or 6 slipped through the woods, cutting throats, burning supply carts, and vanishing before alarm bells rang. The Black Talons were tough, but scattered, unprepared. Walton Rivers had grown arrogant in his crumbling castle, convinced the Vale army would march straight into his jaws. Jaime made sure they didn't. By morning 30 of Walton's men were dead. 3 of his supply lines were burnt, and the bodies were left hanging from trees with a single message carved into their chests. The lion still hunts. It was brutal, it was cold, it was effective. The next night Walton sent a reply. The bodies of 2 Vale scouts were found nailed to the old gatehouse, their eyes plucked out, tongues missing, armor stripped. beneath them, scrawled in blood across the stone, "Eat, let the ghosts feast." Keely cursed when he saw it. Thera wanted to retaliate immediately. Even Sir Miles, who usually kept quiet, demanded blood, but Jaime didn't rage. He just looked at the bodies for a long time, then turned to his officers. "We move at dawn." Thera blinked. "A full assault? No," Jaime said. "We don't need Harrenhal, we need him." He pointed at the Great Hall's tower. "Walton Rivers dies before sunset. I don't care how many walls we break to get to him." The plan was simple, brutal. Jaime would lead a flanking force through the old servant tunnels he remembered from the last war. Narrow, half-collapsed paths that Tywin had once used to flush out rebels. While the main force created chaos at the front gate, Jaime and a dozen hand-picked men would breach from beneath. It was risky, but it was all or nothing now. Before they rode, Clearly Serwyn caught Jaime's arm. "If we fail, the army falls apart." Jaime met his eyes. "Then we don't fail, and if you die?" Clearly asked. Jaime gave a grim smile. "Then maybe the realm will finally rest." The horns blew just as the first light touched the towers of Harrenhal. The Vale banners unfurled, men shouted, siege ladders rose. And in the chaos, beneath the smoke and fire, Jaime Lannister vanished into the tunnels beneath the cursed castle, chasing the one man who stood between him and the silence he'd been hunting his whole life. The tunnels beneath Harrenhal were colder than the winds outside, damp, narrow, and full of rot. Jaime moved through them like a ghost, torchlight flickering across moss-covered stone. The walls felt like they breathed, exhaling centuries of blood and smoke and betrayal. Each step echoed with the memory of screams long silenced. Clearly Serwyn followed behind him, along with 10 other men. Drawn, none of them spoke. They didn't need to. The plan was clear: find Walton Rivers, end this. Above them, the battle had begun. The Vale army slammed into Harrenhal's main gate, ladders rising against walls, arrows darkening the sky. It was a distraction, but real blood was being spilled. Jaime could hear it. War had a sound. It wasn't the clashing of swords, it was breath, men choking, dying, praying, screaming, and somewhere above, Walton waited. The tunnel split at a crumbling archway. Jaime turned left. He remembered this path barely. He'd used it once, under Tywin's command, to smoke out northern rebels hiding in the kitchens. Now it smelled of mold and death. Something had died here recently. He stepped over a pile of bones and moved on. Finally, they reached the end, a rusted iron grate beneath the keep's main hall. Jaime knelt and peered through the cracks. Above, Walton Rivers stood alone, no guards. Just him, pacing slowly in front of a fire, armor stripped, shirt soaked in sweat. Waiting. Jaime nodded to Clelly. The soldiers lifted the grate quietly. Jaime climbed through first, sword drawn. His golden hand gleamed faintly in the firelight. "Use Walton, but as for expectis to show that I'd be fornis Keishans would." Walton didn't turn. "You're slower than I expected," he said. "You're more arrogant than I hoped," Jaime replied. Yet Walton finally faced him, eyes tired but wild. "You could have let this go, rode north, disappeared. But here you are, trying to be a hero at the end of your story." "I'm not a hero," Jaime said, stepping closer. "I'm just the man who finally stopped running." Walton laughed. "Then let's finish it." He drew his sword. Jaime didn't hesitate. They clashed hard, steel against steel, the force echoing through the hall like thunder. Walton was younger, faster. But Jaime was precise, every move fueled by years of war, loss, regret. Every blow he blocked sent pain up his arm, the golden hand rattling with each impact. Cully and the others stood back. This wasn't their fight. It was personal. Jaime ducked a wide slash, pivoted, and struck low, cutting across Walton's thigh. Blood splattered, and Walton staggered but didn't fall. He swung again, mad and wild, rage replacing skill. Jaime caught the blade on his golden hand, sparks flying, and punched him hard across the face. Walton dropped to one knee, bleeding, coughing. "You think killing me makes you clean?" he spat. "No," Jaime said, raising his sword, "but it'll make the world quieter." He plunged the blade forward. Walton Rivers collapsed without a final word. Jaime stood over him, chest heaving, eyes blank. It was done. Silence settled in the hall, not peaceful, just hollow. Behind him, Clee stepped forward. "It's over." "No," Jaime whispered. "It's never over." They burned Walton's body outside Harrenhal that night. No grave, no name, just ash and wind. Fawn, the Black Talons scattered, some fled, some surrendered. The Vale army took the castle by morning. Jaime didn't stay for celebrations. You pause. He sat alone in the tallest tower, the same one Harren the Black died in. Looking out at the riverlands, smoke still rising from faraway villages, he felt no pride, no triumph. Just stillness. Lady Thera found him there before dawn. "You command the most powerful army left in Westeros," she said quietly. "You know that, don't you?" Yeah." He nodded. "You could march on King's Landing." "Crown yourself." He looked at her, tired. "And become what? Another throne of bones?" She sat beside him, silent for a long time. "What will you do then?" she asked. Jaime looked out at the pale horizon. "I'll ride to the Trident, bury the dead, then maybe disappear. And the Vale, they don't need a lion," he said. "They need peace." Oh, she studied his face. "The scars, the wear, the weight of years. You've changed." "No," he replied. "I just stopped pretending I hadn't." Later that day, he gave command of the Vale forces to Lady Thera. The lords didn't argue. They feared him, but they also understood the Kingslayer had served his time. He rode out alone, no guards, no banners. Just a sword, and for the first time in years he didn't ride toward war. He rode towards silence. And in a land where ghosts ruled castles and kings were made from ashes, Jaime Lannister became something more powerful than any lord or soldier. He became the man who chose not to become a monster.